Until today, most surveillance was above the skin, and now it's going under the skin. What I mean by that is that until today, most surveillance, whether by corporations like Facebook or Amazon, or whether by governments, it was mostly about what you do in the world, where you go, who you meet, which TV shows you see, which news you read online. But they didn't look under the skin what's happening inside your body, inside your brain. Now, the main thing we want to know is actually inside the body. We want to know whether you're sick or not, whether you have COVID-19, what's your body temperature, your blood pressure, your heart rate. And this changes the nature of surveillance. Of course, at present, the focus is just on the disease, but feelings are biological phenomena just like diseases. The same surveillance that can tell whether you have COVID-19 can also tell when you're angry, when you're joyful, when you're bored. So if you're now watching this interview and you have, say, a biometric bracelet on your wrist that monitors what's happening in your body, I could know whether you agree with me or not. Whether you think that, oh, this is scary, or nah, this is crazy. What is this guy talking about? Whether you are bored or whatever. Now imagine 10 years from now in a place like, I don't know, North Korea, when every citizen has to wear a biometric bracelet 24 hours a day. And if you watch a speech by the big leader, you can smile and you can clap your hands, but you have no control over what's happening inside your body. If you're actually angry about the big leader, they will know it. This is a kind of totalitarian system that even George Orwell didn't imagine in 1984.
If we assume that this is not the first epidemic that we're going to encounter, it'd be quick to think that democracy as we know it is probably doomed in the long term. How do you feel about that?
I don't think it's doomed. There is nothing inevitable about it. First of all, I don't think we need to give people the choice between health and privacy. People should be able to enjoy both at the same time. I mean, we have seen it before. When I go to my physician, I want to get both health and privacy. My doctor doesn't tell me, hey, before we start, you have to choose health or privacy. No, I get both. I can tell the doctor the most intimate things about my body, about my life. He can ask me questions even about things like my sex life. And I tell him or her honestly everything to get the best treatment, assuming that the doctor will not share this information with anybody else. And we get that. And the same thing should be with this kind of new surveillance. Yes, we need it, but it should be done carefully. First of all, it should be very narrow, just focused on preventing epidemics, and therefore it should be done by a dedicated special health authority. It shouldn't be the police or the secret police or the army. It should be a special dedicated health authority which just cares about epidemics and diseases and doesn't share the information with anybody else. Democracy can be preserved. It's not doomed. We have to make sure that whenever we have more surveillance, it always goes both ways. In a dictatorship, it only goes one way. The government knows an awful lot about you. You know nothing about it. So in a democracy, it should go both ways. Yes, we need to monitor the citizens. At the same time, especially at this moment, we need a lot of monitoring of the government because the government is receiving all kinds of emergency powers, and it's also making extremely important decisions. So I want to know as a citizen, for example, whether the government is rescuing big corporations whose owners are friends with some minister, or whether the government is rescuing small family businesses, restaurants and shops. So this should also be transparent. And I don't want the government to say, no, it's too complicated to let you see all our budgetary. No, if it's not too complicated to follow me, it's not too complicated to follow you at the same time. And if we have this kind of double surveillance up and down at the same time, then democracy is safer.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate just for a second. If we are indeed trying to maximize happiness and minimize pain, and if we do believe that ignorance in a way is bliss, wouldn't mass surveillance and mass manipulation be the key to happiness?
Certainly not, especially given the people who are doing the surveillance and the manipulation. If you could trust them to be these super intelligent and compassionate beings, then maybe we can argue about it. But when you look at most of the governments who are doing surveillance around the world, they are not necessarily the most intelligent or most compassionate. There are many politicians that I don't think they really have the best intentions about the population. And we've seen it so many times before in history. Even if they have good intentions, the problem is that humans are prone to mistakes. If you build a political system on the assumption that the government will never make a mistake, then this is a recipe for disaster. And the big problem with dictatorships is, yes, they have some advantages, like you can speed up the process of decision making because you don't have to consult with many people. It's just one person taking all the important decisions. So obviously it's faster. But the problem is, if that person makes a mistake and he or she are bound to make a mistake sooner or later, they are never willing to admit their mistake and try something else. They usually just blame it on enemies or traitors and demand even more power to fight these enemies and traitors. And they just doubling down on their mistake. In contrast, in a democracy, usually the government is more willing to admit mistakes, or you can replace the government. The voters can admit, oh, we made a mistake choosing this guy, next time we'll choose somebody else. And because there are more voices in the system, then there are more causes of action, and it's easier to say, okay, we tried this, it didn't work, let's try something else. And you don't need to just invent enemies and traitors in order to blame them for all the problems. You can just say, yes, we made a mistake. The previous policy wasn't the best, let's try something else. And this willingness to admit mistake and try something else, this is the real key to human progress in almost every field.
We're seeing a lot of nationalist trends around the world and in different governments. Do you think that fighting this emergency and this virus on the national level is a good decision, or should we do it otherwise? And if we should do it otherwise, why is it proving so hard to reach global cooperation on something like this?
Well, nationalism obviously isn't bad. It's one of the best things that humans ever came up with, is this idea, this feeling that I have a bond with other people around me, even people I don't know on the other side of the country. This is why I pay taxes, so that people on the other side of the country who I don't know, they are not my friends and relatives, they will get healthcare. And this kind of nationalism is very good. The thing about nationalism is to realize that nationalism is not about hating foreigners. Nationalism is about loving your compatriots and taking care of them. And so it doesn't mean we have to fight with the other countries. And there are occasions like this epidemic when actually to be a good nationalist, you need to cooperate with other countries because you can't deal with this epidemic on the level of a single nation for many reasons. First of all, the most important asset in fighting this epidemic is information. We need to understand what is causing the disease, how to prevent the cause of the disease, how to prevent it from spreading. And much of this information comes from other countries. This epidemic started in China, and China encountered it first. And now all the countries in the world rely to some extent on information given by China. For instance, the Chinese were the first to identify the virus and sequence its genetic code. And this helped other countries to deal with the epidemic when it came there. Now, lots of countries are thinking about how to end the lockdown. And again, not only China, but Korea, Taiwan, they were there before most countries. So if now the Italian government is debating how to end the lockdown without seeing a resurgence of the disease, you can just do try and error blindly, speculating about what could work, try something, and maybe it fails. Or, much more sensibly, you can investigate what the Chinese did, what the Koreans did, what the Taiwanese did, what worked, what didn't work, and then you can rely on their experience. This kind of cooperation between countries will make it much easier for everybody to deal with the epidemic. Similarly, when you look at things like medical equipment, if each country tries to produce the medical equipment by itself, and fight with the other countries about the equipment and the raw materials, this will just cause huge inefficiencies in production. It means that equipment is hoarded by the richest countries and doesn't get to the countries that actually need it most. Instead of that, if we could have a global, or at least a continental, let's say in Europe, the entire EU has a single policy about bringing together effort to produce in the most efficient way all the equipment and then distribute it in the most fair way, this could be much more efficient and reduce prices and make it more fair. Another thing that we need is in the economic sphere. Obviously, this is a global economic crisis, not just a healthcare crisis. And if each country just protects its own interest, we will have economic chaos. And certainly the weakest countries, the poorest countries, will not be able to deal with it. The US could have a rescue package of $2 trillion, but Brazil or Egypt or Pakistan can't. So if we don't have a global economic safety net, entire countries might collapse. These are some of the main reasons we need cooperation. Unfortunately, we are now seeing a lack of leadership in the world that it almost seems that there are no adults in the room. Like everybody is just taking care of their own immediate interests, and nobody comes up with a plan for how humanity as a whole can deal with this crisis. And the country which was previously the world leader in the Ebola epidemic, in the global financial crisis of 2008, that's the United States, basically abdicated its position as global leader in the current administration. It made very clear to the world that America now cares only about itself, America first. And it's obviously not working also. America is now first in sick people and dead people. You look at the statistics, America is first. So we don't have a leader. And I think maybe it's for the good that we stop expecting a single country, whether the US or China or any other country, from being leader, and instead have more effective collective leadership, a kind of coalition of the willing. I know that there is also a rise in nationalistic isolationism, even hatred, countries blaming each other, countries blaming ethnic minorities. I hope that more and more people would realize that we can't defeat this crisis without effective global cooperation, that nationalism actually demands global cooperation, because if you want to take care of your compatriots, you need to cooperate with foreigners. Until we eliminate this epidemic from all the countries, no country is safe, because even if you succeed for a while in reducing cases in your country to zero, as long as it continues to spread in other countries, it can come back, and it will come back. The biggest enemy we have now in this epidemic is not the virus. We can deal with the virus. The biggest enemy is our own inner demons, especially our hatreds. They are now coming up. If we can overcome our hatreds and cooperate on this, we can easily defeat the virus.
It's about whether we can do it or not. And it seems like we're at a crossroad right now where, as you said, emergencies accelerate the momentum in history. And right now, it could accelerate either momentum. It could accelerate nationalist momentum, or it could accelerate global cooperation. What do you honestly think is going to happen?
I don't know. I can't predict the future. Again, I'm doing these kind of interviews not to predict the future, but to influence our decisions in the present. I want to help people understand the importance of global solidarity in this moment, so that we make good decisions, that we develop compassion and solidarity and not hatred. And this will make it easier to defeat this epidemic, and will also make it easier to deal with future crises. This is not the last crisis of the 21st century. There could be more epidemics. There are other problems like climate change. All of them will become worse if we now start competing and fighting among each other. All of them, it will be easier to deal with if we now develop global solidarity.
You mentioned predictions, and this is actually the next question that I was going to ask. You said you don't have a magic wand. You can't tell us what the future is going to look like, but you can make predictions and hopefully change the way future will be. And this is something you say in one of your books. Good predictions have the power to change the future they're trying to predict, which eventually renders those predictions as obsolete or wrong eventually. We had predictions about this epidemic by, notoriously David Quammen or Bill Gates. Why were these predictions different? Why did they not alter the future the way they could have?
Because not enough people listen to them. Part of the problem is that you hear all kinds of dangerous scenarios about the future. And as long as it doesn't happen, nobody really knows how serious to take them. What are the chances that this will actually happen? Like, you can spend an awful lot of money on, say, protecting Earth from an asteroid from outer space that could destroy human civilization. And maybe not even in a million years, an asteroid will hit the Earth. So people would say, why did you spend so much money? Instead of giving to healthcare, to education, you spent all that on defending against an asteroid that never came. So you have these kinds of things. And then also you have occasions when people do listen to the warning, they do something good, they actually prevent the worst outcome. And then people say, well, nothing happened. So why did we waste all that money? You know, we look back at SARS in 2003, the SARS epidemic, which was also a coronavirus, it was stopped much quicker than this current epidemic. And some people say that because of the previous successes, some countries this time did not take the warnings seriously enough. Because they said, hey, we had this SARS scare 20 years ago, and we spent so much money, and then nothing happened. Nothing happened because you spent money and because you did the right things. But then you didn't have an epidemic, very few people died, and then the impression was that it was a false alarm. So it's very, very tricky. If you listen to the warning and then you do something well and prevent the catastrophe, then people will say, well, you just wasted money because you see nothing happened. And it's very, very tricky to know which warnings to listen to and which warnings to ignore.
One of the things that I've also read from you is that you believe that there are two masters to existence, which are pleasure and pain. Do you think that the fear that we've developed throughout the last month or month and a half is going to change our behavior fundamentally? Are humans going to behave differently with one another socially once this is all over or it slows down?
To some extent, maybe. Things will definitely change in places like the job market when you realize that you can actually work from home and like universities and schools can have online courses. So these lessons are probably going to change in significant ways, the way that people work and communicate and so forth. But on a more fundamental level, if you think about human nature, I don't think it will change. We are social animals. We like contact. When somebody is sick or in trouble, we usually rush to help them. This is some of our best instincts, to help our friends, our neighbors, our family. And now the virus is using this against us. This is how the virus spreads, by using the best parts of human nature against us. Luckily, we are unlike the virus, which is just a mindless piece of information. We have a mind, we can understand what's happening, and we can change our behavior in order to overcome this. We now understand that too much contact can spread the epidemic, so we stop it. We act from the head, not from the heart. But it doesn't change our fundamental nature. Once the crisis is over, human nature will still be there. Don't worry. I mean, the Black Death, which was much, much worse, didn't change it. The influenza epidemic of 1918 didn't change it. You look at AIDS, for example, in the 1980s, AIDS was much worse in many ways than what's happening now. First of all, in the 1980s, if you got AIDS, you died. It's not like with coronavirus. Most people who will get it will maybe just be a little sick. Just a very small percentage will die. With AIDS, it was a death sentence. And at first, governments, they abandoned the citizens because many of the first patients were gays. Many governments says, we don't care, let them die. It's even good if they die. But what you actually saw happening is that in the LGBT community, people came together. It didn't destroy the community. Actually, people volunteered. They established organizations to help sick people. They established organizations to spread reliable information about this new terrifying epidemic. They put pressure on the government, on the health authorities. And when the epidemic was not completely over, but in the 1990s, after the worst years of the epidemic, the LGBT community was actually much stronger than it was in the 1970s before the epidemic. So, and like this, there are many other cases that, yes, people change their behavior in the height of the crisis because they have to, but it doesn't change the fundamental nature of humans as social animals. Once this is over, I have no doubt that we'll come back and we'll even appreciate more what we took for granted previously.
What happens if we deal with this global crisis only on the national level and we only, let's say, eradicate the virus in certain countries?
If many countries in Africa collapse because of the economy and the political system collapses, you will have a giant wave of immigration. You will have wars which destabilize not just Africa, but also Europe. So you don't want that. But even leaving aside economics and politics and just thinking about healthcare, as long as the epidemic spreads in other country, it can come back to your country and in an even worse form. Why? Viruses or other pathogens that jump from animals to humans, from a bat to a human, initially, they are not well adapted to the human body. They are adapted to the body of a bat. What enables them to adapt to the human body and become more infectious or more deadly is mutations. Now, the longer the virus stays in a human body anywhere on Earth, the higher the chances it will undergo a mutation which will make it more infectious or more deadly. We saw it, for example, with the Ebola epidemic of 2014. Again, initially, it came from bats. When the virus first came into humans, it was deadly, but it was not very infectious because it had difficulty entering human cells. And then the virus underwent a single mutation in one gene in one person, somewhere in West Africa, which made the virus 4 times more infectious. And this started the real epidemic. And this can happen as we speak now. Maybe a similar thing is happening with coronavirus somewhere in Italy or Iran or Brazil or anywhere else in the world, making the virus more deadly or more infectious. And this is a danger to all humans. So as long as the virus spreads in any human population, nobody can really feel safe.
You're saying that in order to inform the population, we need to be able to trust institutions. Is that something that is actually feasible? And if so, how would it become feasible?
Well, institutions are the key. You can trust individuals, but you don't know many individuals. You know 100 people, 200 people. That's not enough. I mean, even for me as a scientist, the reason I trust the results of the research of other scientists, it's not because I know them personally, it's because I trust the institutions. I trust the university that gave them their degree. I trust the journal that published their article. I trust the laboratory where they did their experiments. And it takes time to build good, independent institutions. I know that in recent years, we saw populist politicians undermining deliberately the trust that people have in important institutions like universities, like respectable media outlets. These populist politicians told people that, say, scientists are this small elite, disconnected from the real people. You shouldn't believe them. And you had all these conspiracy theories that climate change is just a hoax, it's not real, and that the earth is actually flat, and that vaccinations are bad for you. And this spread. But I don't think it's too late. Especially in an emergency, people can change their views very fast, and they can discover hidden reservoirs of trust. You look in this crisis, who do people trust? They trust scientists above everything else in all countries. In Israel, they closed down the synagogues. In Iran, they closed the mosques. Churches all over the world are telling people don't come to church. The Pope is doing all these ceremonies on Zoom or YouTube. And why do they do all this? Because the scientists recommended it. Even the religious leaders have trust in the scientists in this moment of emergency. And I hope people will remember it after the crisis is over, that this is where you go to get really reliable information. This is who you trust in an emergency. So when this crisis is over, and in a year or 2 years, scientists come and warn us about, say, climate change, then we don't say, oh, this is just hoax. These scientists, why should we believe them? Remember, who do you believe today, even after the crisis is over?